Good afternoon to all. Welcome. I am Selwyn Rodolfo. I will be the moderator for this session titled Building a Train the Trainer AI Literacy Program for Public Library Staff. Before we begin, we do have a few reminders. We have a code of conduct that we will adhere to throughout this conference. The link will be posted in the chat. If you do experience any issues related to conduct or any other matters, please contact us via email, and that link will also be shared via the chat. And I will share that now. Please be sure that your microphones are muted. During the question and answer segment, please wait until you are invited to unmute before posing your questions or your comments. You may also use the chat option to register comments and questions, which will be addressed at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube. For captions, you can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce Trevor Watkins, our presenter this afternoon. He is the teaching and outreach librarian at the George Mason University in the state of Virginia, United States of America. Please join me in welcoming Trevor. Trevor, you may proceed.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trevor Watkins, and I'm the teaching and outreach librarian, as he just mentioned, at George Mason University. For the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity to work with several public libraries on AI. One of the public libraries that I've worked with since 2019 on several different ventures. One of the last was running a Python workshop. Is the Fairfax Public Library in Fairfax, Virginia, which is the subject of this presentation today. I want to walk you through how the Fairfax County Public Library's AI Task Force and I designed, delivered, and revised their first ever Train-the-Trainer AI Literacy Workshop, which was a 4-hour course that ran 2 cohorts of staff in 2026. So earlier this year in March, and then again in April. I'll show you what we built, why we built it that way, what broke. Literally, one of our apps crashed mid-session, and I'll talk a little bit about that, where I had to actually pivot to another activity, and I changed it the second time around for the next cohort. So I basically eliminated that app. My goal is that you leave today's presentation with ideas you can take back to your own library and use to upskill your librarians and staff, or if you choose to partner with another public library, or if you're a public library, partner with an academic library or whatever libraries to bring AI literacy to the fold to help upskill your staff. Let me first start with the problem, because I'm sure it sounds familiar. When FCPL's AI Task Force decided it was time to get staff ready to work and talk about AI, they were facing 4 pressures. First, staff comfort with AI was all over the map. Some people were already using ChatGPT, Gemini, some use Copilot, albeit a very vanilla version of it, some daily, some never opened it and didn't want anything to do with it. Those who did wanted to know how to use it more ethically. Second, there was a real uncertainty and real anxiety about what AI meant for people's jobs. So there's a real fear there. And it can be difficult to teach a tool to someone who's wondering if that tool will replace them without addressing that directly, which is something that I did. Third, the public was increasingly showing up at the reference desk with questions about AI and actually how to use it. The library was becoming the community's AI help desk, whether it wanted to or not. And fourth, the task force needed an AI expert to help design and deliver the half-day training workshop, and that expertise didn't exist in-house, and so they reached out to me. This project was a collaboration, again, between the public library, Fairfax County Public Library, and GMU Libraries. I from the academic side, and again, where I bring instructional design experience, 16 years of AI subject knowledge, and practical AI experience. The FCPL AI task force brought everything that I didn't have, which is deep knowledge of their staff, their branches, their patrons, their county systems, and the organizational buy-in to make a half-day training actually happen. Luckily, we're able to actually get the director of the library involved in earlier meetings, and we discussed the partnership after their technology manager mentioned our prior collaborations. We developed the curriculum together in 2025, so it was early fall 2025 when we started working on the curriculum, and then I led the delivery in 2026 across 2 cohorts. The task force set clear expectations up front, and I want to highlight a few because that made the training better. We met to run the course outline before the first session or the first cohort, including a technical run-through in the actual training room. We agreed to review evaluations together after each cohort, which is what made the cohort 2 revisions possible. We agreed that programming ideas generated during the training would be captured in a shared document for the task force, so the workshop produced a real product that could be modeled for future use. And finally, the task force members served as co-facilitators, so that was also important. So if you're an academic librarian, your local public library system may need exactly what you have, and if you're a public library, an academic partner is often an email or a call away, or vice versa. What I love most about this project is that we use a Gen AI tool to build the AI training, and we did it in a way that modeled exactly what we wanted to teach. So step 1, the task force created the initial training proposal with the assistance of ChatGPT. So they plugged in all of the things that they wanted as the outcome. They plugged it into ChatGPT. It gave them a solid skeleton, objectives, a 6-part outline, time estimates, supplemental resources that participants could reference later. Step 2, this is where the human expertise took over, and this is where I came in. I went through the proposal and revised the outline, keeping intact the things that they wanted, but adjusting the sequencing and designing the active learning activities, because the ChatGPT draft, like most AI drafts, was structurally sound but pedagogically generic. So the hands-on exercises, the breakouts, where I broke the participants into groups, the discussion, and this was face-to-face, it wasn't online, and the discussion prompts that came from my experience about how adults actually learn, having taught in the classroom in several modalities over the past 20 years. Step 3, I used Claude Opus 4 to convert that adjusted outline into a full lesson plan. The formatting heavy, time-consuming part that AI is legitimately good at. So the workflow was AI drafts, humans decide, AI then accelerates. So that's the same message we delivered to staff about their own work all day long during both of the cohorts and during both of those 4-hour trainings. So when participants asked, did you use AI to make this? I could say yes. And so we brought in that transparency, and transparency brings along credibility. Similar to what you saw in the first slide, where I use Claude, the Fable 5 model. I don't know if any of you have used that yet, but I used that to help me create this particular presentation. So the workshop at a glance. Here's the shape of the 4 hours. We open with welcome, objectives, and icebreaker. The icebreaker was the AI mind map activity. I'll talk about more of that in a moment. And through that activity, actually before that, I talked about some of the basic AI concepts and history, what AI is, what it is not, how the techniques differ, how generative AI is not a new concept. It was actually done back in the 70s under a different technique. So that blew people's minds. Then we went to hands-on activities with machine learning using Teachable Machine. From there, AI in libraries, where they had the opportunity to see or to learn about real systems doing real work today using AI. And then that was followed by a break. The middle block was about safety and ethics, environmental impact, bias, hallucinations, data privacy, misinformation, vendor data practices, capped by the AI Ethics Challenge, a group scenario exercise. Then we moved on to how you help the public use generative AI responsibly, which flowed into the prompt engineering exercises. So there was a lot of active learning, a lot of hands-on exercises, and it was not just me lecturing. We did. After the second break, the last major block is the breakout. And as I mentioned before, that's when we had small groups together where we did some brainstorming and they used AI to create library programming. We then closed with resources and next steps. 2 instructional design notes. First, roughly every 20 to 30 minutes, participants are doing something. They're not just hearing something. So that's really important. Secondly, ethics is not just a module. Safety and ethics regarding the use of Gen AI tools are woven into every section of the workshop. Privacy comes up during the hands-on activity. Bias comes up during the concepts. Copyright comes up during generative applications. If ethics is discussed on only one slide in the workshop, participants will learn it's a compliance topic. When it's incorporated throughout the presentation, they learn it's a lens. So in other words, if ethics appear on only one slide and it's only discussed there, then the message becomes remember to follow the ethical rules or guideline when it comes to AI or any of the Gen AI tools. That's a compliance topic. Throughout the presentation, when you use it throughout the presentation, participants learn how to use and evaluate the ethical use of these tools, and that stays with them. The hardest design constraint was the mixed room. In the same cohort, we had daily AI users sitting next to people who had never touched a Gen AI tool, next to skeptics who quite reasonably wanted nothing to do with any of it after using it. So we opened up with after talking about the brief history of AI, we opened up with a mind map. So I asked them, what do you know about AI? There's no wrong answer. Like when I say AI, what comes to mind? And what don't you know about AI? So everyone in the room contributed. They contributed words. I put core concepts. So if you see here on the slide, I put up first AI, and then machine learning, and then swarm intelligence, neural networks, expert systems. Swarm intelligence, neural network, expert systems are typically techniques that you don't hear about in deep learning. So I talked about those, and then we broke it down into different sections. They also added, again, what they knew and what they did not know. So again, knowing that there was no wrong answer meant that the least confident person in the room can also participate. So for that first 15 minutes, when we went over the AI mind map, everyone participated. So again, this gave me three things: a live diagnostic of the room. I could immediately see where this cohort's baseline was and then calibrate on the fly, addressing any misconceptions right then and there. So any fears and myths that went up on the map early, we talked about that. We addressed them instead of letting that fester. I also used the mind map throughout the rest of the entire workshop as a reference point. So not just myself, but also the participants. So when we touched on a subject later, they went back to the AI mind map because that was on their whiteboard. And throughout the presentation, when we did go back to those concepts, we added additional concepts to that. After the mind map exercise, the first content block was foundation. So my definition of AI has always been that AI is a combination of techniques that perform tasks in ways that mimic human intelligence, with heavy emphasis on mimic. And we also have a technique called swarm intelligence that I talked about earlier, where we studied and tried to mimic the coordinated behavior of things like ants, bees, the migration of birds and particles to produce algorithms to solve problems. And we briefly touched on knowledge organization systems, ontologies. Most of you probably already know this: ontologies, taxonomies, semantic networks, as a bridge to AI. Why? Because large language models are brilliant at predicting the next word, but they lack a grounded factual understanding of how concepts relate. Structured knowledge, the thing that fills the gap, is what we as librarians have been building for a century. With that, I tried to articulate that we are not tourists and have never been. Organizing knowledge is our profession. So we also gave them a simple map of AI capability levels, reactive systems like a chess computer, no memory, no learning, limited memory systems. This is where ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, self-driving cars live. They learn patterns from training data, but don't truly understand. You have theory of mind, where AI that grasps emotions and intentions, and we're definitely not there. It's still experimental. And then we have self-aware AI, which in my opinion, that's sci-fi and that's never going to happen. As much as OpenAI and some of the other corporations say they're close to it, I don't think that that's possible because we don't really truly know who we are yet and we don't understand emotion and all of the other stuff. So the depth test was the constant challenge. Is there enough vocabulary that participants here could use to explain those tools to a person with zero implementation details? In other words, the goal was to give participants enough basic vocabulary to describe and discuss generative AI with patrons, but not burden them with technical details about how the system is built or implemented, because in general, patrons aren't going to care about that. Now, another hands-on exercise, we had Google's Teachable Machine. If you haven't used it, it's free. It's a browser-based tool where you train a real machine learning model with no coding. You define classes or the categories you want the model to learn, like book and not book, or thumbs up or thumbs down. You feed it examples through your webcam. You click train and then you watch it learn in the browser. Then you test it and watch it succeed and also fail. Participants train their own image classifiers. Some of them use books, some of them use pencils and pens, some of them use their laptop. And then we added a step where they had to write one or two sentences describing what they were trying to teach the machine. You can't describe what you taught the model without understanding how machine learning works. It learns patterns from examples and applies them to new data. And the conversation we had about the failures of the tool was very eye-opening to the participants. When their classifier erred, they shared it with the workshop attendees, which I implored them to do. And we talked about it. We talked about why it failed, how it could be improved. And so they understood why training data matters, where biases come from, having their own model get it wrong, and then understanding the why helped them to understand the concept of machine learning without even going into any coding. After the teachable machine exercise, we looked at some ways machine learning is used in library work. So for example, at Carnegie Mellon, you have the CAMPI project. Some of you probably have heard of this. It's computer-aided metadata generation for photo archives initiative, where it uses computer vision to cluster images, similar images, and support metadata work across large photo collections. They understood this immediately, that this sort of applies the same basic concept as Google's teachable machine, but to a very large archival photograph collection. Also, we briefly touched on OCLC Smart Fulfillment Tool, how that uses machine learning on historical data to predict which lending libraries can deliver interlibrary loan materials faster. Overdrive is using AI to analyze marketplace data and give librarians insight into the life cycle of titles in their collection. JSTOR and Clarivate have AI research assistants that summarize publications. So we talked about all of those things, and I showed them, I did demos with JSTOR and Clarivate so that they could actually see those research assistants because they did not have access to either of those databases. Now, safety and ethics. We all know how important it is for everyone to learn and know how to use AI ethically. In the next section of the workshop, we talked about data privacy. What happens to the things you type into a free AI tool? From health information, and a lot of people during the discussion say, yeah, I saw this on social media where they say, well, you can type your health information into ChatGPT or your credit card information or your credit report into ChatGPT. And so, yeah, you don't want to tell patrons that. That's not a good idea. So we had a discussion about that. We talked about bias and limitations in output, whose voices in some cases get centered, whose get erased. Real world cases like Compass and legal system, Compass, COMPAS, and algorithmic loan denial. So that's what Compass is. We talked about a little bit about the NFL concussion settlement and race norming that illustrates algorithmic bias, the environmental impact, the rise of data centers, and the impact on both health to the surrounding communities, and of course, the rise in utility bills. And a lot of them could easily relate to that because they're building data centers around Virginia. We also talked about hallucination, copyright, and also fair use. One more distinction we discussed, because it's core to library work, is misinformation, which is false and shared without intent to harm; disinformation, which is shared with the intent to deceive; malinformation, which can be accurate but is deployed out of context and often maliciously. And I let them know that these models are trained on that information. And so that's why it's important when you enter in a prompt to interrogate the output. Next, the AI ethics challenge. This was another activity, and I disclosed on the slide that the scenarios were created with the assistance of ChatGPT and Grammarly. Participants got realistic library scenarios and had to rule it as either unethical or ethical and defend the why in a few sentences. So for scenario one, a patron emails a complex medical research question. To respond faster, a staff member pastes the patron's specific health concerns and personal history into a free public AI tool, proofreads the summary, and sends it off. So they got this correct immediately and pointed back to a discussion we had on ethics on the mind map exercise. It's unethical. And as one participant pointed out, the AI model stores and learns from the prompts. And so a staff member who enters a patron's personal identifiable health information to a Gen AI tool is giving it to a third party willfully, which violates the library's duty of confidentiality. Another scenario that we used was a library uses AI to draft a short program description, but staff review and edit everything before publication. Ethical. So they got that correct as well. And third, a library uses AI to automatically flag patrons as high risk based on computer use, borrowing habits, and time in the building without ever explaining the system to patrons. Obviously, that's unethical. And that led to a discussion of the why, which is surveillance, opacity, and profiling. Now, for you all, I want you to ask this question, or I want you to answer this question as either ethical or unethical. And this was generated by Claude Opus 4.8. A librarian is asked to create a research guide on local history for a class visiting next week. They create half of the guide, but short on time, ask ChatGPT to generate the rest of the content for the guide, including book titles, article citation, and historical facts. They copy the output into the library's website without verifying the sources, adding a note that says, curated by your library staff in ChatGPT. A student later reports that two of the cited books don't exist. Is this ethical and unethical? Feel free to put that in the chat. What do y'all think? Okay, I see lazy. Yes. Unethical. Okay, very good. Staff did not verify. Absolutely. No matter what tool you use for whatever purpose, you will want to make sure that you are actually interrogating output, as I mentioned before. All right, so for the next topic, we talked about vendors and patron data. And so this topic is related to safety and ethics. And this is an actual topic that participants wanted to discuss further. So this was actually not on the original agenda. So this is a part where I simply added this in and we had this discussion. So as you all know, libraries run on software from external companies, your integrated library systems, and other software that is integrated with the ILS that has access to patron data. And the concern is that vendors could use patron search history or borrowing habits to train their AI models without explicit consent, or sell that data, which we all know corporations to do, even though they say they don't. Usually it's found out that they have, and there's a lot of different examples you can choose from, who then use that data to train their models. So in the first cohort, we didn't get an opportunity to spend a lot of time on this subject, only as a scenario-based question. But for the second cohort, I restructured this as a discussion because this is something that they wanted to have a discussion about. So I asked the room, what do you think vendors can do with that data and how could it be weaponized? And so we all, during the discussion, mentioned that, okay, vendor has access to your search history. They have access to your borrowing history. They can see the patron's borrowing patterns, right? That information can be fed into a large language model or a machine learning tool, and it can be used to profile patrons, infer sensitive information about them, such as a medical condition, and it may not necessarily be true. That patron could be searching for a friend or just looking or just maybe curious about it, but it can infer that that person might have that medical condition or a religion or whatever else. It can be inferred from borrowing history. So even if, and that's even if the patron never said a word. And so while many libraries adhere to ALA's vendor privacy guidelines, some still do not. So data collection should be opt-in, not opt-out by default. And so whenever I'm talking or when I speak to libraries and we go over this particular subject, this is something that I always bring up. I'll ask them that question. If they're not, I always say, well, you should probably have a opt-in, or you most definitely want to let your patrons know that you do have software that's actually that's actually getting this data from them. It's important that they're aware of that. Next, we turn to prompt engineering. So for this module of the workshop, I wanted them to critique the prompts before creating them and try to predict how the tool would respond to a bad prompt. First, fix this AI prompt. I deliberately put bad prompts on the screen. So for example, you're in a library marketing, let's say you're in library marketing, you want a social media post for a speaker series. The bad prompt, write a post about our upcoming speaker event on Tuesday. So naturally they tore it apart. So the questions they asked, well, what platform? Who's the speaker? Who's the audience? What's the call to action? How long? The second example, patrons kept struggling with library Wi-Fi, which is also something that typically happens in a real world scenario. They correctly guessed that ChatGPT and Gemini would create a generic process that wasn't 3 steps nor applicable to how patrons access their library's Wi-Fi. And then they created their own. So I gave them a scenario. One of the scenarios was patron books a study room, does not show up, and you need a polite but firm email to someone who missed their window. So they had to write the prompt, run it in either ChatGPT and Gemini or both, evaluate the output, and then refine it if the desired output was there, or they can intervene and then correct the email. Okay, so they did very well with that as well. Finally, the breakout. So this was the last part of the workshop. So this was a brainstorming, as I mentioned before, AI assistants in creating library programming. So I broke them up into small groups. They could use ChatGPT or Gemini as a brainstorming partner, and then they were given 2 tasks. And then I used the RisePad. So if you're not familiar with the RisePad, it is a virtual document that's anonymous, unless participants want to actually put their name in, where they could have their discussion. And so this is where they wrote like answers to every task and every question through every activity. They put this on the RisePad. And we also, during the discussion, we talked about that. So for task 1, they had to create 3 ideas for community workshops or events at the library. Task 2, they had to take 2 real upcoming programs at their branch and figure out how generative AI could help them create supporting resources. So like marketing, flyers, and material for multilingual communities. And then the groups presented their experiences. Now for the trainer-trainer model, the goal for this trainer-trainer workshop was never for me to teach FCPL staff about AI indefinitely. The goal was to build internal capacity so that they can run their own AI literacy workshops for staff and eventually for the public. Now, as I told them, I'm still available if they want to contact me, if they have questions, and they have access to all the material, all the slides. And that was important. Also, the task force members were co-facilitators and not just spectators. So they helped run the activities, were a part of the activities. So they also answered some questions, participated in the task. They floated during breakouts, and they fielded Fairfax specific questions that I couldn't. One specifically about county policy on the use of AI, which was a recurring question when we start looking at different tools. Next, we have iterating between cohorts. So because we had 2 cohorts, we reviewed the evaluations in between. And so when I looked at the feedback and I did a debrief, which I always do whenever I have any classes or any workshops, to figure out what went right, what went wrong. This is where I decided, okay, like the app crashing, we cut that out. So again, if you remember, we did a technical run, that didn't work. So in the second cohort, I completely eliminated that, and that was do not touch your face. So if you've never used that, that's another sort of machine learning web app that that's used to try to teach machine learning. So that didn't work. The next thing I did was tie Teachable Machine to how libraries are actually using machine learning so that they could, easily pick up the relativeness of it. I revised the ethics scenario, and then of course in the second cohort I used the pad, the Rise Up pad that I didn't use initially. So again, more on the pad. Um, it's a simple, privacy respecting, collaborative pad, and I use it across those 4 activities: the AI ethics challenge, fix this prompt exercise, create a prompt exercise, the programming breakout, some of the other Q&As that we had, and for 2 reasons. First, for the data. Everything participants typed became a record of the session, and that was also shared with the AI task force. Second, for anonymity, because as you all know, if you're in the classroom or if you're conducting a workshop, everybody may not necessarily participate, because in this cohort we not only had we had both managers, non-managers. The director wasn't actually participated in the second cohort. And so that anonymity allowed everyone a voice in every exercise. So if someone was shy or they just didn't want to speak up because a manager was there or their manager was there, they felt comfortable doing that. So everybody throughout the workshop had a voice, and I thought that was important. The last thing I want to talk about is what was hard. The first challenge is sometimes I tend to forget to turn off the technical jargon, which I'm getting much better at. So you can't get too technical, and it's not a problem to be technical, but you want to make sure you're able to articulate to non-technical participants. And then every topic has a rabbit hole. So if you're doing the AI mind map, you can tend to go down down a rabbit hole, and that can suck up time. So you want to be very cognizant of that. And then they also left with a resource kit. I'm going to wrap this up real quick. So at the end, they took home a tool directory. So I pointed them to aitoolsdirectory.com to explore other AI tools that they could play around with. I gave them handouts. I gave them additional successful ways in which AI is used in libraries. And I also gave them the link to one of my Zotero bibliographies. So in there's recommended articles, books that I use and that I've used over the past 15 years to learn. And I reference that whenever I'm talking about it or whenever I'm building systems, because that's also something that I do. And so last but not least, for you to take, partner across library types if possible. The expertise you're missing may be one county over. So if you're a public library, consider this. If you're an academic librarian, consider partnering with someone that may have that expertise in that library. Build the curriculum. If you're going to build it with AI, be transparent. Open with a mind map and AI history exercise. That allows everyone to have a voice initially. So that's sort of the icebreaker. Make ethics the center of the workshop. Give participants an anonymous way to contribute, like the Rise Pad, and then run multiple cohorts if possible. Thank you for listening, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Yes, I can share one question that I've seen in the Q&A. How were the library staff who attended the workshop selected, and what types of positions were included? There's a
That's a very
second
good
part to that
question.
question, but you can go with that part first, yes.
So the library director was in the second cohort. We had two branch managers, some assistant branch managers, systems librarians, reference librarians, librarians that actually children's librarians. So librarians that work with a lot of programming, they were was most interested in that aspect. So they really liked the brainstorming programming exercise that we did, which was the last element. So we had everyone from just about every particular librarian role and also library staff. So they also wanted to learn how to upskill as well. So that kind of covered everybody that was actually in both cohorts. Now the director was only there for the second cohort, but the branch managers and the assistant branch managers and some of the department heads were also there as well. So everybody.
Right. The second part of that question was, did you provide any guidance regarding how they were meant to pass this knowledge on to the rest of staff?
Oh, absolutely. And so after the cohort, one I shared the because everyone wanted the PowerPoint, so I shared the PowerPoint presentation with them. I shared the lesson plan with them. I shared and with the task force blessing, of course, the initial conversations that we had and the initial proposal that they sent to me, how I actually changed it, what I changed in it, and if they decided to run a workshop, or if you decide to run a workshop, you can run it similar to this. And I said, as you can see, even though I have a lot of knowledge in this area, it doesn't take a lot of knowledge to run the workshop. It's important to be conversational and have dialogue, and that was sort of the core that made this work. Because we didn't just, and it was a mixture of those. It wasn't just doing the work, doing the prompts. It was also talking about it, having those discussions, having, sort of, I know that there have been libraries that's closed down, but that's not because of AI. That has been because of budget. So that was one of the questions that came up. But I said, it's important that even if you're skeptical about it, because I am, and I told them that as well, it's important to learn how to use it. And because you have patrons coming in and they're asking you about this information, it's important for you to be prepared. And so I also open it up to, if in the future you want to run a workshop and you want me to assist them, if they wanted me to assist them, I'd be happy to do so. So I haven't gotten any contacts about that yet, but that is what that's what took place in terms of if they want to reproduce this, they can.
Good. Thank you. You're right. A few more questions are coming in. A quick one as regards a link to the slides. Have you provided that or any handouts?
Oh, you mean this
That was a
slide?
question. Yes, to the slides for this
Oh,
session.
I can. If you I don't think I submitted these, but if you and I'll put my email in the chat.
Good.
Um,
Right. So I'll go on to another question as time's running. Um, do you use a did you use a paid or free version of Gemini or ChatGPT?
so
Gemini or
for
ChatGPT? Yes, for your
That's a very
breakout
good question.
sessions.
Yes, that's a very good question. So we use the free versions of ChatGPT and Gemini because I wanted to make sure that we did this test on what they actually have the availability of. In other words, they don't know the Fairfax Public Library has not paid for an institutional license. So it wouldn't have been disingenuous for me to use a different model that they're not going to actually have access to. So I use it on the free version. Now, when I was creating, when I was creating this, I used the paid version. So Claude, and I have paid versions to Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and at GMU we also have Patriot AI. So, and we also have Copilot. So I'm constantly stress testing these tools. But yeah, to answer your question, we use the free versions.
Good. Thank you. We do have one or two other questions, but we are out of time. It's now 2:45. Trevor, possibly you may be seeing the names of the persons who posed the questions, and you may be able to just answer them maybe via, not sure, somewhere how on the system.
Okay.
But
And please feel free to email me if you want
right,
access to if you want access to the data that I have, send me an email and I'll be happy to share that.
indeed, right, great, because you shared your email address there. Good. So
Mhm.
folks, those who did not get an answer to their questions or queries, please share an email with him. Thank you very much, Treasure, for that
Thanks,
um,
everybody. Thank you.
presentation. I think it was very well received. You all,
Thank you.
our another presentations begin in 14 minutes time. So see you then. Thanks
Thank
again,
you,
Trevor.
Selwyn.
Okay,
Thank,
all the best.
thank you, Selwyn. Have a good day.
You too.